with you guys today. Finally, ESPN has decided that the year 2024 actually did exist. So often this season, whether it was the draft, All-Star game, so often they were comparing this year's numbers to 2023's numbers. Oh my gosh, but it's up if you compare it to 2 years ago. Well, it's down if you compare it to last year. A constant back and forth that we had with ESPN all season long. And you know what? Finally, we did it, folks. We did it. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. ESPN has finally understood that they can't dance around this anymore. Just hold the L with 2024 and then just compare it to accept your L and then go and say all the positive things that you want to say after. No shame in that. No shame in that.
ESPN just admitted what they've been hiding for months. After an entire season of selective reporting, cherry-picked comparisons, and mysteriously delayed numbers, they finally released the full WNBA Finals ratings. And the results? They're not just bad. They expose the entire narrative collapse happening in real time. Here's what makes this absolutely wild. Nielsen upgraded their measurement system this year. They added smart TVs, set-top boxes, expanded out-of-home viewing to 100% of markets. Every single metric designed to boost these numbers. The 2025 finals had every advantage baked into the system. They still couldn't beat 2024, but that's not even the most revealing part. Throughout the entire season, ESPN played a shell game with viewership data. They'd compare 2025 numbers to 2023, conveniently skipping over last year's Caitlin Clark explosion. When that didn't work, they'd release one game out of 4, or they'd drop NBA TV numbers but hide ABC ratings. The pattern was obvious to anyone paying attention. Now they're backed into a corner. The finals are over. The season's done. They can't dodge anymore.
Haystack. Last year, they put it all out. This year, very selective on the certain numbers that they made available to the public. We have to wait for ESPN to report it now. We have to wait for these networks to report it now. They don't give it to sports media anymore. They don't give it to TV ratings guy. They don't give it to any of these other programs anymore. Now they just gonna keep it close to the vest, sit behind the scenes, fluff up their numbers as much as they can, and then finally release something.
Think about what he's describing. This is ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, having to wait behind closed doors to massage their own numbers before releasing them publicly. No more independent verification from TV ratings analysts. No more third-party sports media getting raw data. Just ESPN sitting in a room, figuring out how to spin a 5% increase that required completely changing how viewership is measured. That 5% number? It's actually devastating when you understand the context. Last year's postseason used the old Nielsen methodology. This year added millions of previously uncounted viewing situations. Smart TVs in bars, set-top boxes in hotels, out-of-home viewing that was never captured before. All of that infrastructure designed to inflate numbers, and they squeezed out 5%. If you applied this year's measurement system to last year's games, the 2025 postseason would be down significantly. We're talking double-digit percentage drops, but ESPN can technically say up 5% year over year because they changed the rules mid-game.
2025 WNBA Finals averaged 1.5 million viewers, second most watch on ESPN, behind only 2024. Oh yeah. Finals are down this year. How does that look, WNBA? How does that look? Think about it, folks. How does that look? They are already trending downwards. When it comes to finals that aren't involving Caitlin Clark, the numbers are already pointing downwards. And it was a sweep. Oh, goodness. But in the WNBA's case, but guys, you had Asia Wilson, the face of the league.
Listen to that frustration. He's not even trying to hide it anymore, because here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. The WNBA just ran a massive natural experiment, and the results are conclusive. You had A'ja Wilson, the reigning MVP and face of the league. You had Breanna Stewart, one of the most decorated players in basketball history. You had veteran stars, championship pedigree, competitive games. Everything the league claims matters for viewership. The finals opened with 1.9 million viewers for Game 1. Then something happened that should terrify WNBA executives. 500,000 people vanished. They watched the first game and said, "I'm good." Game 2 dropped to 1.2 million. Game 3 barely recovered to 1.3 million. The closeout Game 4, 1.44 million. Compare that trajectory to last year. The 2024 finals built momentum. Game 1, 1.1 million. Game 2, 1.34 million. Game 3, 1.4 million. Game 4, 1.7 million. Game 5, 2.2 million viewers. Each game gained audience. People told their friends, casual fans tuned in. The series became an event. This year's finals bled viewers with every game.
Over year. You see? That's actual growth. Even with growth, even with the new metric system, even with the new counting system that Nielsen has implemented. 5%, not real growth. 30%, okay, I could say, okay, that's some growth right there. Because if you compare that to last year, it's still probably an increase. But if you compare the postseason using last year's ratings metrics, that's down. But we move on. Let's take a look. We have Game 1 of the 2025 finals giving you 1.9 million viewers. You have Game 2, Game 3, giving you 1.2 and 1.3, down from last year's. And then Game 4.
Those percentages tell the entire story. Last year's finals didn't just beat the year before, they demolished it. 57% increase for Game 1, 115% for Game 2, 112% for Game 3, 88% for Game 4. The series deciding Game 5 was up 142% from the previous year's closeout game. That's not normal growth. That's not a rising tide lifting all boats. That's one specific phenomenon creating unprecedented interest in a league that had been stagnant for 2 decades. Now look at 2025. The finals averaged 1.5 million viewers total. Last year averaged 1.6 million. But remember, this year's numbers include all those Nielsen upgrades. Strip those out and apply an apples to apples comparison, and you're looking at a 20 to 25% decline minimum. At least 1 million people who watched some part of last year's finals didn't watch a single second of this year's. They had the opportunity. ESPN promoted it heavily. The games were accessible. Those viewers made a conscious choice without Caitlin Clark. They weren't interested. The league can spin that however they want. They can talk about A'ja Wilson's greatness, or the competitive balance, or the quality of play. The numbers don't lie. The audience spoke with their remotes.
That is what the Caitlin Clark effect looks like. I gotta be honest. That's what a lot of new eyeballs looks like. Gotta be honest. Peaked at 3.3 million. So we can all sit here and agree that at the bare minimum, 1 million people that saw a piece of last year's finals didn't see a single piece of this year's finals. Can we agree on that? Cool, cool, great. Crazy work. Crazy work. 2025 averaged 1.5 million. Sports Media Watch comes out with an article. WNBA Finals sweep down from last year's full.
Sports Media Watch just dropped the hammer with that methodology note. They're essentially saying before you celebrate these numbers, understand they're on steroids compared to previous years. And even juiced up, 2025 still lost to 2024's natural performance. Think about the implications. ESPN and the WNBA spent all season trying to prove that last year's explosion wasn't about one player. They wanted to demonstrate sustainable growth. They needed to show that new fans came for Clark but stayed for the league. They desperately tried to establish that the rising tide was permanent. The finals obliterated that narrative. This wasn't a slow decline. This wasn't a minor dip. This was immediate, measurable audience rejection. Game 1 curiosity turned into Game 2 for apathy. The casual fans who discovered women's basketball last year took one look at a Clarkless finals and bounced. And here's what makes this so problematic for the WNBA's future. Aja Wilson just won her 3rd MVP. She's in her prime. The Liberty just won back-to-back championships. The Mercury have Diana Taurasi's legacy appeal. If these stars and storylines can't maintain the audience Clark brought in, what happens when this current generation retires?
Going from the maximum number of games last year to the minimum this year, the WNBA Finals was unsurprisingly less of a draw. I think it's the WNBA fatigue, which is why it was less of a draw, if we got to be honest. The 4-game Aces Mercury WNBA Finals averaged 1.5 million viewers across ESPN and ABC, trailing only last year's 5-game Liberty Link series at 1.6 million as the most watched final since 2000. The WNBA expanded from best of 5 to best of 7 this year. Keep in mind that Nielsen has this year expanded its out-of-home viewing sample to cover 100% of markets and switched to a new methodology that adds data from set-top boxes and smart TVs to its pre-existing panel.
That comparison is absolutely brutal. Barry Bonds on steroids still hitting fewer home runs than a clean Aaron Judge. That's exactly what happened here. The 2025 finals had every possible advantage: expanded measurement, smart TV data, set-top box tracking, 100% market coverage, and still got beat by 2024's straight numbers. But let's dig deeper into what this means for ESPN's investment. They just signed a massive media rights deal with the WNBA. They're banking on sustained growth and expanding viewership. Their entire business model assumes that last year's spike was the new baseline, not the ceiling. These finals suggest they miscalculated badly. Because here's the thing about sports media rights: they're valued on projected future growth, not past performance. ESPN paid for the WNBA expecting 2024's trajectory to continue. They anticipated building on that 2.2 million viewer Game 5. They modeled out scenarios where finals games regularly crack 3, miss 4 million viewers as the league matures. Instead, they got an immediate regression, and not just any regression, a decline that happened despite favorable measurement changes. If you're an ESPN executive looking at these numbers, you're starting to panic. You just committed hundreds of millions of dollars to a property that might have already peaked.
You have a built-in advantage over prior years. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. You're telling me this year is on steroids and still getting beaten out by the natural?
500,000 people minimum said, "I'm good." That's the line that should haunt WNBA headquarters. Because those aren't hardcore haters. Those aren't people who never gave the league a chance. Those are viewers who watched Game 1, evaluated what they saw, and consciously chose not to return. That's the most damning audience verdict possible. When people don't show up in the first place, you can blame marketing or awareness. When people show up and immediately leave, you can't hide from the product judgment. 500,000 viewers sampled a Clark-free finals and rejected it. Now layer in the broader context. The WNBA had its best regular season attendance ever in 2024. That momentum was supposed to carry through to 2025. Instead, the league saw scattered reports of declining attendance for non-Clark games even during the 2024 season. The finals were supposed to prove that wrong. They were supposed to demonstrate that stars like Wilson and Stewart could carry the torch. The numbers prove the opposite. The casual audience that discovered women's basketball through Clark hasn't transferred their loyalty to other players. They're not invested in the league. They're invested in one specific athlete who didn't make the finals.
Aaron Judge. I'm just saying. That's what it's looking like. That's what it sounds like. That's what it appears like. Last Friday's clinching Game 4 averaged 1.4 million on ESPN, down from the 1.7 last year, but surpassing all other Game 4s since the finals expanded beyond a best-of-3 format. After opening with 1.9 million viewers, they failed to get that back. After opening up with 1.9, they have failed to get anywhere near that back. 500,000 people minimum said, "I'm good on this. I don't need to watch Game 2, Game 3, or Game 4. I'm good." and they didn't turn on.
Let's talk about what Sports Media Watch is really saying between the lines. When they write viewership figures will tend to have a built-in advantage over prior years, they're giving ESPN and the WNBA an out. They're saying we know these numbers look comparable to last year, but they're actually worse. This is the sports media equivalent of a doctor gently preparing you for bad news. They're not going to directly say the WNBA is in trouble because they have relationships to maintain, but they're making sure anyone with basic reading comprehension understands these finals flopped relative to expectations, and expectations matter enormously in sports business. The WNBA's entire growth narrative depends on convincing sponsors, networks, and investors that they're on an upward trajectory. One down year can be explained away, but what happens if 2026 finals without Clark show the same pattern? What if this isn't an aberration, but the new reality? Sponsors are already asking these questions. They paid premium rates for WNBA partnerships based on 2024's explosion. If those audience numbers don't hold without Clark, they overpaid dramatically, and sponsors who feel like they overpaid don't renew at the same rates. They renegotiate down or walk away entirely. The same logic applies to media rights. ESPN can absorb one disappointing finals, but if this becomes a pattern, if Clark's playoff games consistently double the viewership of finals without her, they've got a massive problem. They can't build a sustainable media property around one player who might not make the finals every year.
Because if you compare that to last year, it's still probably an increase. But if you compare the postseason using last year's ratings metrics, that's down. But we move on. Let's take a look. We have game 1 of the 2025 finals giving you 1.9 million viewers. You have game 2, game 3 giving you 1.2 and 1.3 down from last year's. And then game 4.
Look at those year-over-year increases from 2024 again. 57%, 115%, 112%, 88%, 142%. Those aren't incremental improvements. Those are seismic shifts in public interest, and they all happen during one specific final series featuring one specific rookie. The WNBA wants to pretend that growth was about the league finally getting its due. They want to claim it was about increased marketing spend or better scheduling or competitive balance. But the 2025 finals just ran a controlled experiment that proves otherwise. You had great players, you had competitive games, you had primetime slots and heavy promotion. You had expanded Nielsen measurement that should have inflated the numbers, and you still lost viewers compared to last year. There's only one variable that changed. Caitlin Clark wasn't playing. This creates an existential crisis for the WNBA, because if Clark is the only draw for casual fans, what happens when she retires? What happens if she gets injured? What happens in years when her team doesn't make the final? The league can't build a sustainable business model around the unpredictable playoff success of one player. But right now, that's exactly what the numbers suggest. Clark games draw, non-Clark games don't. It's really that simple and that devastating.
Folks, how does that look? They are already trending downwards. When it comes to finals that aren't involving Caitlin Clark, the numbers are already pointing downwards. And it was a sweep. Oh, goodness. But in the WNBA's case, but guys, you had Asia Wilson, the face of the league.
The WNBA fatigue argument is fascinating because it exposes an uncomfortable truth. The league might have burned through its goodwill with casual fans. Last year, Clark brought millions of new eyeballs to women's basketball. Those viewers showed up with open minds and genuine curiosity. Then they watched how the league treated its biggest star. The physical play that bordered on targeting, the dismissive comments from veterans, the narrative that Clark's success was somehow bad for the league, the constant attempts to diminish her impact. Casual fans noticed all of that, and when the finals rolled around without Clark, they had a choice: support the league that seemed ambivalent about its biggest draw, or just move on. The ratings show which option they chose. This is where the WNBA's messaging strategy completely backfired. They spent all season trying to prove they didn't need Clark. They elevated other players. They pushed narratives about parity and depth. They acted like her absence from the finals was no big deal, maybe even a good thing because it would showcase the league's overall talent. The audience disagreed. loudly, with their viewing habits. And now the league is stuck. They can't suddenly pivot and admit Clark was the draw all along. That would undermine everything they've been saying. But they also can't ignore the massive viewership gap between Clark games and non-Clark games. They're trapped in a narrative of their own making.
After opening with 1.9 million viewers, they failed to get that back. After opening up with 1.9, they have failed to get anywhere near that back. 500,000 people minimum said, I'm good on this. I don't need to watch game 2, game 3, or game 4.
That closeout game number is the final nail in the coffin. 1.4 million viewers for a championship clinching game. In most sports, the closeout game draws the biggest audience. Casual fans who didn't watch the series tune in to see the trophy presentation. The stakes are highest. The marketing push is strongest. This year's Game 4 drew fewer viewers than last year's Game 4, which wasn't even the closeout game. Last year's actual closeout, Game 5, hit 2.2 million viewers. That's a 36% drop from the championship moment last year to the championship moment this year. Think about what that means. The single most important game of the season, the culmination of the entire year, the moment when casual interest should peak, it lost more than a third of its audience compared to last year. You can't spin that. You can't blame it on scheduling or competition from other sports. You can't attribute it to anything except audience disinterest in a finals that didn't feature the league's biggest draw. And this is with Ajay Wilson, who the WNBA has desperately tried to position as the face of the league. She just won her 3rd MVP. She's in her prime, she's incredibly talented, and her championship closeout game lost 800,000 viewers compared to last year's finals. That's not a knock on Wilson. It's a reality check about who actually drives casual viewership in women's basketball right now. The WNBA can market Wilson all they want. They can give her every accolade and platform, but the numbers show that casual fans simply aren't as interested in watching her compared to Clark.
And you know what? Finally, we did it, folks. We did it. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. ESPN has finally understood that they can't dance around this anymore. Just hold the L with 2024 and then just compare it to accept your L and then go and say all the positive things that you want to say after. No shame in that. No shame in that.
ESPN finally accepting the L and moving forward. That's the strategy shift happening in real time, because they can't keep playing the comparison game. They can't keep cherry picking which years to reference. The 2024 season happened. It's in the record books, and every future season will be compared against it. That creates a brutal baseline for the WNBA, because 2024 wasn't a normal growth.